Hi guys, welcome to the very first video lecture for world history. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at the Neolithic Revolution. The teachings and objectives for the lesson are as follows. We are going to identify and describe causes and effects of the development of agriculture. By the time that we are finished with this lesson, you will create a T-chart foldable listing the advantages and disadvantages of the Neolithic Revolution. So first, let's talk about what life was like for humans before agriculture was introduced. Humans depended on nature for their survival. They foraged for food and they also hunted animals for their meat and for their pelt. They also lived in a nomadic lifestyle, meaning they moved around from place to place following their food. They were called hunters and gatherers. The Neolithic Revolution was the introduction of agriculture and the domestication of animals. This means that people went from hunting and gathering to ranching and farming. We think that this occurred about 8,000 years ago. Instead of hunting and gathering, humans began to grow their own food and raise and breed their animals. In different parts of the world, different types of grains were grown, but their diet was mostly made up of grains, things like wheat, barley, rice, and corn, depending on where they lived. Wild animals were then domesticated. That means that they were tamed and they were bred. People used goats for their milk and their meat. They also domesticated animals like cattle, pigs, and chickens. All of this development in their agriculture and their ranching methods led to a surplus of food. That means that people had enough food to feed themselves and they even had extra, which eventually they had to develop ways to store it for the future. And this eventually will also lead to trade. Because people had animals and farms to tend to, we saw the development of permanent settlements. People started moving into these villages. They had to stay in one place in order to take care of their crops and their animals. And so they settled along rivers, which gave them access to fresh water for themselves, for their animals, and for their crops. After the agricultural revolution, the population quickly spiked. 2 million people inhabited the planet prior to the development of agriculture, and it spiked to about 90 million humans after agriculture. Because of the surplus of food, people had extra time, which meant that they could devote time to developing new technologies that make their lives easier. A lot of these technologies centered around farming. Things like the ox-driven plow made farming much more efficient. In order to transport goods and people faster, people also developed the wheel. And for comfort and faster weaving, people developed the loom. A lot of time was spent improving farming techniques so that food would grow faster and better. So people began to use fertilizers. This allowed for nutrients to be embedded into the soil. And they also developed systems of irrigation. It was too dangerous to move too close to the rivers and have your farms close to the river due to flooding. So they developed systems like the ones that you see pictured here, where they have large canals and ditches that divert the water from the river and delivered it to distant locations like their farms and their homes. We are going to create a graphic organizer that allows you to list the advantages and disadvantages of the Neolithic Revolution. You will also given a cartoon on the Neolithic Revolution and an excerpt from Jared Diamond's book. I need you to look at those both, and then using that information and information from the lecture, I want you to list the advantages and disadvantages of the Neolithic Revolution in your foldable. Lastly, I want you to consider what you read and think about whether or not the Neolithic Revolution was good for mankind. Make sure you create a thesis statement like we have been practicing, and in your thesis statement, support your argument with at least 2 examples. So the question you're asking yourself, do you think the Neolithic Revolution was good for mankind? That's a thesis statement that you need to create with at least 2 examples. If you have any questions, bring them to class, and thanks for watching.